The fork stopped halfway to my mouth when I heard it. Becca, since you're the one with the stable job and no life, you'll cover the wedding, right? It's only fair, you're just the backup parent anyway. The overhead chandelier hummed above the Thanksgiving table, casting a warm amber glow on the turkey platter between us. My sister's wine glass caught the light as she raised it, waiting for me to respond. The crystal stem gleamed. Our parents laughed, not the kind you do at a joke, but the kind that says they'd been expecting this, maybe even rehearsed it. The gravy boat sat untouched in the center of the table, steam rising in thin wisps. I could hear the ticking of the mantel clock in the next room, each second louder than the last. My younger daughter's crayon paused over her coloring page at the kids' table. She looked up. Part of me had known this moment was coming for years. The other part had been pretending it wouldn't. My name is Rebecca, and I've spent most of my adult life being the dependable one, the sister who picks up checks, covers emergencies, and never complains. This is a story about what happens when someone mistakes your silence for permission, and how a grandmother's quiet love can outlast a lifetime of favoritism. Before I go on, tell me where you're listening from, so I know I'm not the only one who's ever been called selfish for finally saying no. To understand how I ended up at that table, frozen with a fork in my hand and 15 years of resentment rising in my throat, I have to go back a bit. I grew up in a tree-lined suburb just outside a southern city, the kind of neighborhood where every house has a front porch and parents wave at each other from driveways on Saturday mornings. Magnolia trees bloomed every spring. Kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on. But inside our house, the rules were different. Vanessa was 4 years younger than me, and from the time she could talk, she was the favorite. It wasn't subtle. It was the kind of thing you notice at 6 years old when your mother buys your sister 3 dresses, and you get one from the clearance rack. When I got a B+ in chemistry my junior year of high school, my father sat me down at the kitchen table and asked why it wasn't an A. His coffee mug sat between us, the handle pointed toward me like an accusation. When Vanessa failed algebra twice, once in 10th grade, once again in summer school, they hired her a private tutor and took her to Disney World as a reward for trying. I learned early that love in our family wasn't given equally. It was earned by one daughter and gifted to the other. I left for college at 18 with a partial scholarship and 2 jobs, one at the campus bookstore, one waiting tables on weekends. I studied pharmaceutical sciences, graduated with honors, and landed a sales position at a mid-sized firm before I turned 23. My first apartment was a studio with a window air conditioner that rattled all summer and heat that barely worked in winter. I ate ramen 3 nights a week and walked to save on gas. Vanessa, meanwhile, dropped out of college after a year and a half, calling it soul-crushing and corporate. She moved back into our childhood bedroom, the one with the good light and the walk-in closet, and started posting lifestyle photos online. Our parents called it finding herself. I called it unemployment with better filters. The first time my mother called asking for money, I was 24. She'd had a stroke 2 years earlier, a minor one, but enough to leave her with medical bills the insurance didn't cover. My father's voice was tired on the phone. "Your mother needs help with the prescriptions this month. Can you wire 300? I said yes. I always said yes. A year later, it was property taxes he couldn't cover because business had been slow. Then it was Vanessa's car payment because she was between sponsorships and needed reliable transportation for meetings. Every request came with the same unspoken weight. You're the one who can. You're the one who should. I wired money on Friday afternoons after work, sitting in my car in the company parking lot, watching my savings account balance shrink on my phone screen while I told myself it was temporary. It never was. By the time I was 30, I'd been promoted twice. I married Daniel, a middle school science teacher I met at a friend's backyard barbecue. He had steady hands, a steady heart, and a quiet sense of humor that made me feel safe. We bought a 4-bedroom house in a suburb with good schools, the kind with a backyard big enough for a swing set and a small vegetable garden. Our daughters were born 2 years apart, bright, curious girls who looked like him and laughed like me. I worked my way up to regional sales director, managing a team of 12 across 3 states, earning a solid income that should have been enough for us to build the life we wanted. It was enough. But it was also never enough, because there was always someone else who needed it more. Vanessa, by then, had rebranded herself as a full-time lifestyle influencer. She posted photos of avocado toast and hotel rooftops, motivational quotes over sunsets, mirror selfies in boutique dressing rooms. Her follower count hovered around 40,000. Her income, as far as I could tell, came from occasional brand partnerships and our parents' checkbook. She lived in a downtown condo worth nearly $700,000, gleaming hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a kitchen island bigger than my first apartment. Our parents had co-signed the mortgage and covered the down payment. When I asked my mother about it once, she said, "Vanessa needs support while she builds her brand. You've always been fine on your own." I didn't ask again. The requests kept coming. Mom's prescriptions. Dad's roof repair after a storm. Vanessa's credit card bill when a sponsorship deal fell through. I kept a separate folder in my email labeled Family, every wire transfer confirmation, every Venmo receipt, every text asking for help. 15 years of silence. 15 years of showing up. Not once did anyone say thank you. Not once did anyone ask if I was okay. The Thanksgiving dinner started like it always did. I arrived early with 3 side dishes and a pumpkin pie I'd baked the night before while my daughters decorated the crust edges with leftover dough. Daniel helped my father carve the turkey in the kitchen, the two of them talking about the middle school's new science lab. My mother set the table with her good china, the set she'd inherited from her mother, and only used twice a year. Vanessa arrived 40 minutes late in a white cashmere sweater and knee-high boots, her phone already out, snapping photos of the table setting before she'd even said hello. She posted 6 photos to Instagram before sitting down. Halfway through the meal, she tapped her wine glass with a fork. The sound cut through the conversation like a bell. "Everyone, I have an announcement," she said, her smile wide and practiced. She held up her left hand, showing off a princess-cut diamond that caught the chandelier light. "James proposed last weekend in Nashville. We're getting married next October." Everyone clapped. My mother teared up. My father raised his glass. My daughters cheered from the kids' table. I smiled and said congratulations, because that's what you do. Then Vanessa turned to me. "Becca, since you're the one with the stable job and no life, you'll cover the wedding, right?" Her tone was light, almost teasing, but her eyes weren't. "I mean, it's only fair. You make all that money, and Daniel does most of the parenting anyway. You're basically just the backup parent. I need this. It's my one big day." The room went quiet for half a second, then my mother laughed. "Oh, Vanessa," she said, shaking her head like my sister had just told a harmless joke. My father cut another piece of turkey, not looking up. I blinked. My fork hovered above my plate. The gravy had started to congeal around the edges. The chandelier hummed, a soft electrical buzz I'd never noticed before. My younger daughter looked over from the kids' table, her crayon frozen mid-stroke. I could see the question forming on her face. I set my fork down slowly. The tines clicked against the plate. "I'll think about it," I said. My voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. Vanessa smiled. "Great. I'll send you the details." I didn't answer. I smiled and nodded and served myself more mashed potatoes I didn't eat. That night, lying in bed next to Daniel, I stared at the ceiling and replayed the moment over and over. Backup parent. No life. It's only fair. Daniel reached for my hand in the dark. "You okay?" he asked. I told him I didn't know yet. 3 weeks later, on a Wednesday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. No greeting. Just a link to a shared spreadsheet. I was sitting in my car after a client meeting, the heater blowing warm air that didn't quite reach my hands. I opened the link. The spreadsheet had tabs: venue, catering, flowers, photography, attire, accommodations. Each tab had line items, costs, and notes. Venue: Napa Valley Estate, $35,000. Catering for 150 guests, $28,000. Photographer and videographer, $12,000. Florist, $8,000. Band, $6,500. Dress and alterations, $4,200. Accommodations for the wedding party, $11,300. The total at the bottom of the summary tab, $85,000. Below the spreadsheet, a message. Family helps family, Becca. Let me know when you can wire the venue deposit. They need $15,000 by next Friday to hold the date. I stared at the screen. My breath fogged the windshield. $85,000. I'd paid for her car. I'd covered Mom's hospital copays for 3 years. I'd wired Dad money for property taxes twice. I'd fronted Vanessa's rent 4 times when her influencer income dried up. I'd given up family vacations, delayed replacing our aging HVAC, stretched our budget to cover every emergency that wasn't ours. And this was what it earned me, a demand for $85,000 delivered via spreadsheet with a deadline. I texted back, I can't cover this. Her response came in under 60 seconds. Are you serious? After everything we've done for you. I didn't reply. I drove home in silence, my hands tight on the wheel. 2 hours after I walked in the door, the family group chat exploded. Vanessa had posted a long message, 7 paragraphs, calling me selfish, jealous, and bitter. She wrote that I'd always resented her success and couldn't stand to see her happy. She said I made more than enough money and that refusing to help was a betrayal of everything family stands for. My mother's response came 10 minutes later. Rebecca, your sister only gets married once. This is what family does. My father added, we're disappointed in you. Daniel read the messages over my shoulder that night while I stood at the kitchen sink, hands braced on the counter. Do you want to respond? He asked. I shook my head. I didn't trust my voice yet. What none of them knew, what I hadn't told anyone except Daniel and my closest friend from college, was that 2 years earlier, my grandmother had called me on a Tuesday afternoon and asked me to meet her at her estate attorney's office. She was 87, living in a small assisted living apartment with a view of a garden she loved. She'd been recently diagnosed with congestive heart failure. I thought she wanted to say goodbye. I rearranged my schedule and met her the next morning. The attorney's office was in an older building downtown, the kind with brass fixtures and wood paneling that smelled like lemon polish and old books. My grandmother sat in a leather chair across from the attorney's desk, her hands folded in her lap. She looked smaller than I remembered, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. The attorney, a calm, gray-haired man named Mr. Whitfield, slid a folder across the desk. Your grandmother has named you successor trustee of her revocable living trust, he said. The trust is currently valued at approximately $340,000. I blinked. Grandma. She reached across and took my hand. Her skin was thin and cool. I've watched your parents for 50 years, she said. And I've watched you for 38. I know what you've given. I know what they've taken. This is for you to protect. Mr. Whitfield explained the terms. The trust would be divided between Vanessa and me after my grandmother's passing, but there was a clause. Vanessa's share would only be distributed upon her demonstrating sustained financial responsibility and respect for family relationships, as determined by the trustee. My grandmother's voice was steady when she spoke again. I'm not punishing her. I'm protecting you. If she's learned to value what matters, she'll get her share. If she hasn't, you'll know. My grandmother passed away 6 months later on a Sunday morning in April. I held her hand. The trust transferred quietly. I'd honored her memory by staying silent, hoping Vanessa would change. Hoping my parents would notice the imbalance. Hoping I wouldn't have to choose. They hadn't. She hadn't. And now I had to. The week after Thanksgiving, I called Mr. Whitfield. I met him at his office on a Tuesday afternoon, the same room where my grandmother had changed everything. I brought a folder, printed screenshots of Vanessa's texts, the group chat messages, 15 years of bank records showing transfers I'd never been repaid. I brought my grandmother's journals, the ones she'd left me in a cardboard box with a note that said, "Read these when you need to remember you're not wrong." Mr. Whitfield read everything slowly. He made notes on a yellow legal pad. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me. Your grandmother knew this might happen, he said. She watched the same patterns you did for decades. That's why she structured the trust this way. She wasn't being cruel. She was being honest. He paused, tapping his pen against the pad. Let me ask you something, Rebecca. If someone hides their hand every time the bill comes, but shows up every time they need something, are they family, or are they just used to your wallet? I didn't answer right away. I thought about Thanksgiving dinners where I brought the most dishes and left with the least gratitude. I thought about every wire transfer, every late-night call, every time I said yes when I wanted to scream no. I don't know anymore, I said finally. We spent the next 2.5 hours building a case. I documented every text message, every group chat attack, every public and private demand. I pulled bank records showing Vanessa's spending patterns, $4,000 handbags, $800 brunches, spontaneous trips to Europe, while I'd been wiring her rent money and car payments. I printed pages from my grandmother's journals. She'd written about the favoritism in detail, page after page in her careful cursive. One entry, dated 3 years before her death, read, "Rebecca has carried this family on her back since she was old enough to write a check. Vanessa has never carried anything but a designer purse Rebecca probably paid for. It's time someone carried Rebecca." Mr. Whitfield drafted a formal letter citing the trust clause and recommending an immediate freeze on all distributions pending a comprehensive financial responsibility review. The letter outlined the evidence, documented financial irresponsibility, public disparagement of the trustee, repeated failure to honor informal debts, and a pattern of exploitation. It was 3 pages, single-spaced, citing dates and amounts. I read it twice. My hands shook the first time. They were steady the second. I signed it on a Friday afternoon. The winter sun slanted through the office window, casting long shadows across the desk. Mr. Whitfield sent the letter certified mail that day. Vanessa would receive her copy by Wednesday. So would my parents, as named secondary beneficiaries. The call came exactly when I expected it, Wednesday evening, 7:43 p.m. Vanessa's name lit up my phone screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. I didn't say hello. She didn't wait for me to. "What the hell is this?" she screamed. Her voice was raw, ragged. "You froze Grandma's trust? Are you insane? That's my money, Becca. Mine. You can't just take it because you're jealous I'm getting married and you're stuck in your boring life." I let her finish. I counted to 5 in my head, slow and steady. Then I spoke. "I didn't take anything, Vanessa. Grandma put a clause in the trust. You get your share when you demonstrate financial responsibility and respect for family. You've demonstrated neither." "That's not, you can't," she sputtered, her words tripping over each other. "I'll sue you. I'll take you to court. You'll lose everything." "No, I won't," I said calmly. "The trust is legal. The clause is enforceable. And I have 15 years of documentation showing exactly why Grandma wrote it the way she did. You called me the backup parent. You demanded $85,000. You've never paid me back for a single loan. Grandma knew exactly who you were, and she planned for this." Silence. "Then, you're disgusting." She hung up. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter and exhaled slowly. My hands were steady. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. My mother called 11 minutes later. I answered. "Rebecca," and she said, her voice shaking with either anger or tears. I couldn't tell which. "How could you do this to your sister? She's getting married. This is her dream. You're ruining her life because you can't stand to see her happy." I'd rehearsed this conversation in my head for 3 days. I'd written down what I wanted to say, practiced it in the mirror, tested the words until they felt true. "Mom, I've given you more than $60,000 over the past 15 years. I've covered your medical bills, Dad's taxes, Vanessa's car, her rent, her credit cards. I've said yes every single time you called. Not once have you said thank you. Not once have you asked if I was okay." Grandma saw all of it. She made her decision. "I'm honoring her wishes. You've always been jealous of her," my mother said. "Ever since you were little. You can't stand that people love her." Something inside me cracked. Not broke, cracked. Like ice shifting under weight. "I'm not jealous, Mom. I'm tired. And I'm done." I hung up. 2 weeks later, the consequences began. Vanessa's wedding plans collapsed when she tried to book the Napa venue herself. Her credit cards maxed out on the deposit attempt. Her fiancé, James, who'd apparently assumed the family would contribute significantly, started asking questions about her spending habits and her debt. One of those questions led to another. The engagement didn't survive the month. My parents tried to intervene, calling Mr. Whitfield's office, demanding I reverse the freeze. He calmly explained that the trust was irrevocable, the clause was legally sound, and any attempt to challenge it would cost them more in legal fees than their potential distribution. They threatened to sue anyway. He sent them a formal letter outlining exactly what that lawsuit would cost and what their chances of winning were. They didn't call back. Christmas came. For the first time in 20 years, I didn't go to my parents' house. I stayed home with Daniel and our daughters. We baked cookies using my grandmother's recipes. We watched movies in our pajamas. We opened presents by the tree Daniel and the girls had decorated while I was at work. My mother sent a group email on Christmas Eve calling me heartless, selfish, and cruel. She wrote that I'd destroyed the family. My father added that I was no longer welcome in their home. I didn't reply to the email. Instead, I forwarded them something I'd scanned the week before, my grandmother's journals, all of them converted to PDF. 230 pages of her careful handwriting, documenting 40 years of family dynamics, favoritism, and financial manipulation. She'd written about the birthday parties where Vanessa got 3 gifts and I got 1. The graduations where my achievements were footnotes and Vanessa's were celebrated. The money my parents borrowed from her and never repaid. The late-night phone calls where she'd asked them to treat me fairly and been told I was fine. She doesn't need the attention. On the last page, dated 2 months before her death, she'd written, "Real love doesn't come with conditions. It comes with respect. And respect is something you earn, not demand." Rebecca earned it. The others spent it. When I'm gone, I hope she finally sees that she was never the problem. My parents didn't respond. 3 months passed. Winter turned to spring. I started seeing a therapist, a kind woman in her 50s who specialized in family systems and boundary setting. I cried in her office more than once. I also laughed. I learned words for things I'd felt my whole life: enmeshment, triangulation, scapegoating, parentification. I learned that I wasn't selfish for saying no. I learned that I'd been saying yes to the wrong people for the wrong reasons for too long. In early April, I received a short email from Vanessa. The subject line was blank. The message was one sentence: "I guess Grandma really did like you better." No apology. No acknowledgement. Just bitterness, one last time. I didn't reply. I archived it and closed my laptop. That same week, Daniel and I took the girls to the mountains for spring break. We stayed in a cabin with a view of the ridge line, hiked trails that wound through pine forests, and ate pancakes on the porch every morning. My daughters collected smooth stones from the creek and built tiny cairns along the bank. I watched them, their laughter bright against the sound of the water, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Light. On a Sunday morning in late April, I sat on my back porch with coffee and the newspaper. The sun filtered through the oak trees in our yard, warm on my shoulders. The garden was starting to bloom: tomatoes, peppers, basil, all the things I'd planted in March and hadn't had time to tend. But they were growing anyway, pushing through the soil, reaching for light. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I knew before I opened it that it was my father, messaging from a new phone. The message read, "Can we move past this? It's been long enough." I read it twice. Then I set the phone face down on the table and took another sip of coffee. The birds were loud that morning, calling to each other across the yard. I closed my eyes and listened. I didn't pick the phone back up. I'd spent 15 years being the person everyone leaned on, the safety net, the backup plan, the dependable one who never said no. It took one legal letter, my grandmother's final gift, and 3 months of therapy to realize I didn't have to be that person anymore. The trust remains frozen. Vanessa's wedding never happened. Last I heard through a mutual friend, she moved to another state and deleted most of her social media. My parents send occasional emails that I don't open. I don't feel guilty anymore. I don't feel angry either. I feel free. My grandmother used to say that the hardest boundaries to set are the ones with people who taught you that you shouldn't have any. She was right. But she also taught me something else, something I read in her journals and carry with me now. Love without respect is just weight you're carrying for someone else. And some weight, no matter how long you've held it, you're allowed to put down. If this story resonated with you, share your experience in the comments. Tell me if you've ever been the dependable one, the backup plan, the person everyone calls when they need something. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop being the person everyone expects you to be and start being the person you deserve to become.